Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for holding this hearing, and I'm grateful for the testimony of all the participants, but I particularly want to acknowledge not only Senator Kenley that I had the opportunity to introduce, who is a leader in Indiana, a man I greatly admire, but also I want to appreciate two other of the witnesses. Mr. Meisner with Amazon. Amazon is a great corporate citizen in Indiana, and we appreciate the tone and tenor of your testimony and your remarks today. And I also want to acknowledge Mr. Byrne, who I've had the pleasure to meet because of his association with education reform at the Milton and Rose Friedman Foundation that is proudly located in Indianapolis, Indiana. So this is a distinguished panel, to say the least. I find this discussion enormously helpful, Mr. Chairman. And it is clear that since the advent of not the Quill decision, but the Commerce Clause itself, that under our form of government, we have the Congress is essentially granted exclusive power to regulate interstate commerce at the national level. I have, as you know, Mr. Chairman, and other members on this end of this committee, I have long opposed taxing the Internet. I greatly associate myself with comments that were made about the extraordinary innovation that's occurred in e-commerce in this country, and I believe it represents a bulwark of American prosperity in the last 20 years. I believe the moratorium on Internet taxation has been prudent, and I've strongly supported it. It does strike me, though, that as this marketplace has matured, that there is an argument, as has been made eloquently by several on the panel, for us to consider letting states decide. But it strikes me that we ought to follow, at least this conservative is committed to following a couple basic principles. Number one is no new taxes. And my colleague from Texas and I feel instinctively share a particular view of taxes. Maybe I'm presuming, but we ought to make sure there's no new taxes on the people of the several states. Secondly, I do acknowledge that there ought to be no undue burden on commerce, particularly e-commerce in this case. I'm also very interested in what would be the recommendation of members of the panel about the proper small business exemption. I think the two large principles here for me is I don't think Congress should be in the business of picking winners and losers. And inaction by Congress today results in a system that does pick winners and losers. I'm a very strong advocate of federalism, as you are, Mr. Chairman. And it is my judgment that having Congress continue to stand in the way of letting states decide if we can meet these other criteria is worthy of our deliberations here as we preserve and promote and seek to invigorate the principles and the practice of federalism across this country. Let me ask this question, though. I'll direct this to Senator Kenley in the time that's remaining. That we just heard Mr. Coble speak about a Blinds.com radio ad, the tagline of which, I'll just quote him and paraphrase him. I don't accuse the company of any particular distortion, but we've all heard ads like this saying that in most states, no sales tax, there's no sales tax on Internet sales. Let me ask you, Senator Kenley, in a point of fact, is it that there is no sales tax on Internet sales, or is it simply that states do not have the authority to collect taxes that are owed? Because this to me is in our very first conversation about this, Senator Kenley, I'm someone who believes if you owe taxes, pay taxes. But maybe you can address that. What is the situation in America today, first in Indiana and all over the country, Is there no sales tax on Internet sales, or is there, in fact, a sales tax? It's just simply Indiana and other states do not have the ability or capacity to collect it under the law.
Thank you for the question, Congressman Pence. First off, I would say that this is not a tax on the Internet. This is a tax on the consumer who is going to receive the government services that are provided in whatever state that is. As to your question about whether or not there is a tax or whether the tax is collected, we have noticeably been unable to collect the tax other than by having the retailer remit. And so that's why we've gone to these great lengths to make it cost-effective or cost-free, particularly for small retailers, to be able to have a collection and remission process. If we didn't do this, I'm afraid we'd end up like Greece and nobody would pay their taxes. And we don't want to go there. So it's just been a difficult proposition to work it out. I think once you start down other paths of trying to find ways to collect that use tax, which is already due and owed, then you get into things that you're trying to get information about consumers. Are you participating in invasion of privacy? Are we using the heavy hand of government and the tax collector to beat on people unduly? And the sales tax system, which historically has been, as Mr. Marshall states, that the retailer collects and remits the tax, that's the historical precedent, and we can make that work in this system due to the advances in technology, even since the Internet age of commerce started.
But the tax under Indiana law, and I'll only ask you to ask, the tax is owed.
The tax is owed
by the consumer.
It's owed in all 45 states. They all have the same situation in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pence. On the way to recognizing the gentlewoman from California, I'd like to recognize Congresswoman Jackie Spear.